Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. My name is John Dupre. I'm one of the founders of Revel, and I wanted to take this opportunity or this series, so to speak, to talk with some of my friends who are experts in the interior design field, because admittedly, I am not that. But I think it's really important to talk with people who are in the trenches in interior design in ways that they're making their business more profitable. And so one of the things that's big for us is the ability to allow interior designers to make money with larger ticket items like flooring specifically. And I can tell you myself over and over about how great I am and how great we are, but we all know that's worthless because I'm not a designer. So I figured, why don't we hear it from people who are actually doing this? So today we have with us Miya from Miya Interiors. And she has been in this game a while and is one of the best people I know at this whole thing. So I'm really excited to just let her tell her story and talk about what she's doing in a way that's going to make more sense than anything I could ever say. So, Lori, thank you for doing this.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to talk about this.
Yeah, well, it's fun, right? Who doesn't love talking about business while we're all stuck at home?
Yeah.
So, now, are you at home? Is that your home? Or
It's my home office. Yeah.
that? I am insanely jealous.
Of
I
my
am at
paint.
my, I love it. No, I am at my kitchen table at the moment. I actually have two different home offices, and I'm currently sitting in neither of them. So, I guess my first question for you is, how long have you been an interior designer, and how long have you been in your own sort of business, or did that start at the same time?
So I've been an interior designer since 2004. I actually started my first company when I was 21 and then started my design business when was older. So yeah, since 2004. So we've been in it a while.
Wow, good for you. I don't know if there's like a certain point with interior designers where it seems like I haven't met a lot of, and maybe this is just me, my lack of exposure, but I haven't met a lot of designers, it seems like, that are in that sort of middle stages. It seems like everyone's either just starting out, or if you make it past a certain point, like you're in it to win it.
That's interesting. I actually kind of feel the same way. It's either kind of the baby designers or they really figured business out. They have the business kind of common sense and the design and figured out how to launch those two together. So,
Well, that's what I wondered too, is can you be artistic enough to make up for bad business practices?
ooh, I don't know if you can. I guess actually, yeah, you can, because if you surround yourself with the right people, then because I know my team is pretty key in everybody having their different roles and strengths. So yeah, actually, I changed my answer.
Huh.
I think you
All right,
can.
that's good to know. And I guess if you're working for someone else and your job is purely creative, then that probably makes that
Sure.
easier.
Yeah.
Wasn't a key thing I wanted to mention today, but it just was something I was thinking about. So I guess about your business then, are you predominantly residential? Do you do commercial? Do you do both? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
We do both, but definitely are heavier on the residential side.
It does seem like most people specialize in one or the other. Even anyone who does both, it seems like everybody has their specialty. Or you
Yeah.
lean. They seem like different processes to me.
Completely different processes, especially in the bidding process. And I see it more so with the flooring industry as well. Like how we bid a flooring job for commercial is completely different than how we do a bid for residential.
On the flooring thing, let me ask you, I mean, what made you decide to add that to your design business? Were you always doing it? Like when you started, you thought, I'm just doing the full thing, or is that something you kind of got into?
Do you know, I kind of got into it. I opened my first store in 2007. And of course, that was right when, the economy was going down.
Oh, I remember
And
it
so,
painfully well.
yeah, it was painful, learned a lot of lessons. But during that time, I was just trying to come up with other ways to make income. And as I was speccing these jobs, I was just watching the flooring store down the street or the contractor take the business over and over. And so I just started thinking about it and started doing a lot of research, and really just said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sell flooring. This is crazy. So it was met with some resistance. The flooring industry really is, it's very protective. It's kind of a secret community, I feel like, a little bit. It's very hard to get into typically until Revel Woods. But it just, yeah, so I just had to figure it out, and but it's been very profitable.
Well, I admire you. I remember when we first talked, you told me that story, and I was like, that is really hard to do because the flooring industry is fairly protective,
Yeah.
especially above the consumer level. It is, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of, we're not going to sell people that, you know, don't have this specific type of showroom or don't have this specific type of business model. It's very difficult, I would say, especially for designers. So I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you back then.
No, no.
I was busy failing at something else.
Yeah.
Actually, wait, 2007. What was I doing? I was
Were you a C plus in 2007? Were
yeah.
you B plus? Like,
Oh, solid C minus at that point. I had to work my way. My story is very classic, like a guy who started at the middle and with a lot of hard work continued along the middle and then finally ended at the middle.
at the middle.
Yeah, solid C plus. Now I think at that time I was in the flooring business, but I was selling sandpaper. I was working for the sandpaper company, which, as I've told people, is as sexy as it sounds.
It is a
Um,
good job.
Sandpaper After Dark. That was my first podcast. Uh, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned 2007 and starting it in that time because there's a lot of parallels between that and what's going on now,
Yeah, very,
in a way that, you know, originally when this pandemic started, everybody thought this was going to be more kind of like 9/11 and less like 2008. And now it's starting to feel like, and who knows when you're watching this in history, but at this exact moment in history, it's starting to feel like both.
it really is. It
Yeah.
really it is. So one thing I want to mention, when I kind of first started the flooring, one of the biggest obstacles besides getting into the door was the credit line that was required. So to get in with those big manufacturers, Shaw and Mohawk and all those companies, you've got to have a credit line open 100 grand or more for each company. So
Wow.
it's a big buy-in. And so it was a risk, but that's where I feel like Rebel Woods is just genius at,
Well,
make.
I definitely appreciate that. No, we do not require anybody buy in $100,000 to work with us. But that is, so at that time, you just decided, you know what, I can do this and I'm going to put the money up and I'm going to make this happen.
Pretty much
Wow. Did they
learned.
have any other requirements of you at that time? I mean, I know you have a showroom. Did you have
So
one then?
I did have a showroom then, but it wasn't large. And most of the dealers were like, no, we don't sell to designers. So I'm like, no, we're a store. Now we're a flooring store. But it's really actually, it was pretty tricky to get in for a while. And then I learned along the way as I started, I would lose some bids and I'm like, why am I losing that bid? Well, it's kind of like furniture pricing where there's different tiers. So, there's designer pricing and then there's stocking dealer pricing and then there's like true stocking dealer pricing and then there's volume pricing, so getting to know your reps, that all takes a while and to get in on those different levels. And it's a lot of work.
So you were finding you were being outbid for what? So wait, in that situation, were you speccing the product and then getting outbid for it?
Speccing the product but as right about that time, things were really taking off as far as online sales. And
Okay.
so when you spec something, of course, anybody can turn the sample over and Google that and be like, oh, I called 15 dealers and
And then they don't mind taking.
around. And of course, they're going to outbid you. So it took me a while to figure out, like, if I really want to get every sale, it's got to be something everybody can't get. And education, being able to talk about, have the conversations with the builder, have the conversation with the installers, have my installers, just all those pieces that just helped
Huh.
build up something more successful.
So when you so speccing kind of a branded product, I mean, that had to have been so frustrating to do the work, to pick something, have that, whatever manufacturer set, this is what's going on this job, and then just have the client say, you know what, I'm going around and I'm outbidding you, or you're getting, why are you charging $8 a square foot for this? This carpet store down the street is selling it for $740.
Yeah. Or sometimes $7.99. And,
And
one penny. That's
that
like
was just enough.
I lost it by a penny.
Well, I mean, if it's a big enough job, I guess a penny over 10,000 square feet adds up. But that again is frustrating. And so I guess that happens too in other parts of the business, like furniture and that sort of thing as well, right? Where clients will, and I know has to be an ongoing frustration with interior designers in general, with their clients shopping them.
Yeah, definitely. It happens more often than not now. And I think flooring just fits in with the interior designer right now, where everybody's looking for new sources of income, where you can get shopped by all your furniture lines. I think if you can offer a product to the builder and the consumer, um, you can give them some information about it, and it's a product they can't shop out. They can't get online and find it everywhere. And it's quality. You can explain the quality. I think that's an easy sell.
Now, if you're an interior designer, though, I know there's some hurdles that they run into. So some of the things we constantly are hearing, I'll help shop with the flooring, but the contractor ultimately buys that. He kind of puts his foot down and says, I'll buy this. Thank you for all the work you did in getting everything picked out. I'll put this in my pocket now. How did you kind of get around that? Or what would you recommend somebody today getting around that? Because maybe the situation's different.
Little different. So one thing, I have really good communication and connections with my builders. So I make sure when I'm working with my builder, I'm really coming at them and having a conversation more as a business person and not as the designer. So I'm talking in their language more so. I'm really kind of put on my business hat and I'm approaching it like that. So that I think right there just kind of sets the groundwork a little bit for them to know I'm not just running around changing everything, making your life harder. Like I'm coming at it from something they understand a little bit more. So I think that helps. I think also just understanding the product you're selling when if you know what substrate, what's going on underneath the flooring, and you can just name a few things that need to happen, I think then they'll be like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Okay. And I also really don't make it a choice. I'm like, this is what we're using. This is where it's at. Here's the total. Like, I just kind of present it like it's not an option.
Oh, so, and I guess as part of that, would you say making sure you're working with the right kinds of contractors or help? Because I know sometimes some designers get in on the job later and
Yeah,
it's suddenly everything's already
that's a
picked.
little harder.
Right. And they're just asking like, well, I just want you to pick the drapes or whatever. And I don't want to, belittle drapes or minimize that at all. But I know as a designer, a lot of them probably I know I would want as many as I possibly could, as much of the job as you possibly could get, especially now, if it seems like jobs are going to be fewer and further between. That idea of how do I maximize everything out of each of these jobs? Um, on that note, so I know obviously adding something like flooring requires a bit of an education. I know we've tried to build the tool, the platform to ease as much of that as possible. We're more than comfortable giving any designers some talking points on here's what you can say to a builder or a contractor or remodeler or whomever you're working with or the client directly to know why you're picking this. And we also will work directly with installers and people like that to make sure any of their fears are assuaged. Am I pronouncing that right? That so it's the future note to self: don't use words you're not confident in how to pronounce. But I know that in that situation, though, the trade-off for that can really be worth it. Profitability wise, and you don't have to talk about your full numbers, but even on a per job, how much money can you make by being the one who ultimately sources the flooring?
So it really depends on what I'm sourcing. Typically, of course, ultimately I source the tile, the carpet, and the hardwood, or whatever product's going down. By far, hardwood is the moneymaker. Tile, it's really about quantity. You make pennies, but it's over quantity. Hardwood, hands down, my biggest moneymaker. So it really depends on the size of the house. I will share that we average over $1 million a year in flooring sales. So
Wow.
that has definitely made up for furniture sales happening online. So even though we still do that, it's been a good market for us. So
That is a huge. I mean that, and now I know most designers can't think, well, I'm going to just do this now, so I'm going to make that much, or I'm going to sell that much this year. That probably happens over time, I'm guessing. But the idea that potential being there is, it's amazing how much money then is left on the table
Oh,
per
so much
project.
money. I mean, if you've got a house that's, even if it's just the hardwood, um, and they're doing it on the main floor, I mean, if you can make a $3,000, $4,000 profit, why would you not? Why would you walk away from that?
No, and we've tried to make it so it's not that much more work either. I mean,
Oh,
yes, you're going to
completely.
have to spec it, and you'll have to. There's some things you have to manage, and we do our best to hold anyone's hand through it. Obviously, you and I've worked together a few times. I don't have to hold your hand as much because you did it the hard way, but
Yeah, I did do it the
um,
way.
but hopefully that's not necessary for everyone. Now, if someone wanted to get into this, would you recommend designers, do they all need to invest in a large showroom or even any kind of showroom necessarily? Or is it possible to spec some, I mean, I know the answer from us specifically, but in your mind, would you say, look, this is just so much easier to have a showroom, bite the bullet and invest? Or is something, if I'm working just out of my outdated kitchen, and it's not saying their kitchen's outdated, I am saying mine is, uh, and I'm not really going to be able to invest, especially in any kind of retail space anytime soon. Is this something like, is this just not for me, or can I still do this?
Oh, absolutely, you can do it for sure. I think every designer honestly should be doing it. If they are specing the flooring, I think they should be making the money on it, because what happens is you spec it, you spend that time with the client, you go over it with the builder, inevitably something goes wrong or it goes down and they're worried it's not quite right. You're there during the install, you're talking them off the cliff, like all of those pieces that are happening, you're still involved in all of it. And you're still probably calling the flooring store, helping create the schedule for the builder, all of those things. You're still doing that. So why not make the money off of that? I can say that. So I do have somebody that handles the flooring full time for me, as far as the ordering goes, and someone that does the invoicing. But as she started to work with Revel Woods, I don't need her for that spot with Revel Woods, because you've cut out so much of the work that we have to do on our end. Just from tracking the purchase orders, because we figure out receiving, like all of these, the freight company, all of those pieces add up to labor, out of money out of my pocket, but it's a lot of hours that go into it, where you can get on Revel Woods, and I feel like it's dummy proof. Like, I really do. I think it's so easy. I'm not worried about one of my girls specking Malaysian walnut in our desert climate. You know what I mean? Or I'm
I
not.
do. It's possible the designers don't, but if you don't know, you
No,
can absolutely pick the wrong thing, no matter
I
how beautiful it is.
we have pulled it out more times than I can count. Like, people that just don't understand the product, or where that wood is coming from, or how it reacts in your climate, or the quality level. There's just so much that goes into it. So that's what I love about Rebel Woods, that you really have taken all of the guesswork, and I feel like the liability issue away, because you've taken care of that. So I could jump in total confidence and order product for my client and know that it's going to be a great product. I don't have to have a big showroom. I don't have to have all those massive builder samples. Um, I mean, the samples are genius. You're
Oh, thank you.
literally genius.
Well, what we did with that, so everyone knows too, is as people might be watching this, might not be as familiar with our process. We took really everything that we thought a flooring sample needed to demonstrate. We knew that interior designers maybe are not going to have full showrooms. And if they do, they're not going to want 13 or 14 different flooring displays, which is what you would need. I mean, each display rack holds on average anywhere between 8 to 12 SKUs. So if you want to have any kind of solid flooring offering, you probably need at least 5 or 6.
Mhm.
And that takes up an enormous amount of space. And so our thought process was, okay, well, that's not going to work for a designer who's responsible for so many different things and is not going to open a floor and decor sized retail showroom someplace to display everything.
Yeah.
So what we thought was, okay, how do we engineer this in a way that makes more sense? And we had to go all the way back and said, okay, well, what does a flooring sample actually need to show? And we came up with four things. It has to show color, texture, sheen, and variation.
Yep.
And the first three, color, texture, sheen, absolutely need to be seen in person. The variation, that fourth one, is the only reason why those samples have to be that large. And variation means, knots, streaks, any
Right.
kind of character. What you can expect to see over thousands of square feet of flooring. And even though they're never totally accurate, they give you at least an idea. And we thought, well, variation doesn't need to be seen in person if you know how shiny it is, how it feels, and what the color looks like. So we've offloaded that to photography, and then the samples themselves can be quite a bit smaller, hopefully not too small.
No, I actually think they're perfect.
Okay.
I can put them in a bag, like I can keep them in containers easy. They're really, I think, genius. And I have to say, like on a bigger sample board, like our big wood boards, you don't always see the variation in that either, because the manufacturer, I've noticed over the years, a lot of times they'll put a lot of the same colors together on the board. And if you still have to go on their website and look at that floor down just to see the variation. So you don't need a big board to show that, because you're not going to see it anyway.
It is one of the worst kept secrets in the flooring industry that the person making the samples in many cases is not the highest or the guy who's been there the longest. They usually, like, that's the entry level position, is putting the sample boards together. And it's unfortunate because it's actually really important. So you will probably have to see it down or see larger pictures of something anyway. In that situation, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is, with the floor store sample size, it's not a perfect system, but it is the best system we had up until this point. So it's just what
Yeah.
everybody did.
No, like those smaller samples, and they're easy. I can take them to the cabinet company and have them match a stain off that little piece. Like, it's just so easy to pass around and carry, and my back thanks you too. So
Yeah, I as someone with back issues, I get it. Totally get it. Yeah, that I know if you're doing in-home sales too, that's kind of important. But I would just think our thinking too is just from a storage standpoint. Like, it was just nobody wanted to have 20 or 30, 18 or 24-inch sample boards. Where you're going to put them in your garage, they get beat up.
yes, they
It's
do.
you're going to try and leave it with the client. That's your only sample. You can't get another one. A lot of places will charge for them. Sampling is a pretty big deal. Now, installation wise, you eventually now, are your installers on staff with you, or are you partnering with independent installers? How do you handle that?
So we've gone a few different ways with this. Right now I have them independent. So I work with several different crews that we've worked with for a long time. And I have installers from the really high end that do like our Park City, those maybe 3 million up homes. I've got kind of that medium priced installer that I know, kind of my everyday buyer. And then we've got some that are a little bit more affordable that are going for apartments, or maybe builder 1 and 2 grades starting out. So we do have different, but they all kind of, before I work with any of them, I kind of let them know what my process is, what I expect. I let them know, like, we're very professional. This is how I run it. It's a business. I give them the guidelines of how to work with us, and they do great. So
Have you found that when you provide them with, if you're handling the sourcing of the materials, I know from an installer standpoint, they get very nervous when they hear designers or even the homeowner directly purchasing the flooring that they don't know, because they're a designer typically, or a homeowner who doesn't know, is going to source flooring based on two criteria, right? Color and price. And those don't really matter to the installer. So I guess the question is, do you ever get hit with that level of resistance? because they're worried when you're new with them. Obviously, if it works, they keep
Yeah.
coming back. But
Yeah. I
did
think
they
at the
ever?
beginning, we probably did a little bit, but usually if I tell them, I'll give them a sample of the product and let them see it. And they're just like, oh, okay. Or they already know the product.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, you know, or they'll put a little disclaimer at the bottom of the bid, like, you know, this is
We
the
don't
price.
know what this is.
If the flooring's perfect, there's no variation, there's no warping, there's, you know, list out all the things. But
Where they don't
so,
have to grade it themselves on site.
yeah.
We have had that. I mean, as former installers, so anyone who doesn't know, our background, we are. I grew up in the industry, so it's been something for me that everyone's jealous. You grew up in the flooring industry, and it's like, I know not everyone can be so
Well,
lucky.
you do come from flooring royalty, so
Yeah,
I, yeah,
we hijacked that. I'm only second generation. Unfortunately, a lot of the people in the flooring industry are like fourth and fifth generation. Like, it's crazy. But my father now is currently chairman of the National Wood Flooring Association. So it
yeah,
is
and
been fun.
extremely nice. I just have
Oh,
to say, I adore your parents. Like
well, thank you.
the nicest people. So
Well, I think so, but they're probably going to watch this, so I have to say that.
you have to say,
But they were no, they're great. But it is so that is one of the benefits we hope to entail if a designer is working with an installer who is, he immediately hears, they're getting it from someplace online or whatever. Like, they get really uncomfortable, and understandably so. We've had installers we've worked with in our local business where they installed something from a box store that I won't mention the store or the brand, but people in the know will have heard of both of them. But
yes,
yeah, what's that?
I could probably guess.
Yeah, probably. But the installer really had to fight with it because it was mill run garbage that the designer, actually, I don't think this one had a designer on it. This one was just a homeowner who purchased something. But they he had to fight with it, and the floor failed, and ultimately it fell on the installer because the installer is legally where the last line of defense is. So if there's a product that installer installs, it's considered accepted by the installer
Yep.
as okay. So typically, what we advise when we work with them, if there's ever any manufacturing defects, and I would it's rare, but I'd love to say it's impossible for there to ever be anything wrong with any of our products or anyone else's. But if I did tell you that, you should close this video immediately because I'm lying to you. So, but when there is, we tell the installers, look, if there's an issue, stop immediately
Yeah.
and let us know, and we're going to work through it. Because if he installs it and he was like, yeah, I thought it looked a little weird that it was splitting apart as I was installing it. And it's like, well,
Not
why did
quite.
you keep doing that? Like, now you own this.
Another 5,500 square feet.
Right. Exactly. So it's, so I know from their perspective, if you're offering them quality kind of sourcing partner, it does
Yeah.
put their mind at ease. And I
Oh,
know,
completely at ease. So we always give them the specs on the product. We let them know what it is when we're bidding the job, all of that, so they're familiar with it. And the other thing is, we always tell our installer, if there's ever an issue, do not call the homeowner. Do not call me direct. I'll run over. I'll take care of it. Like, I don't want to get everybody panicked, and like, stuff happens. It always works out. Let me know so I can just get on top of it and yeah, take control of it.
that is good. And I think the key to that probably, I mean, you work with people you trust. I mean, we're not your only flooring provider, so you only work with people you've vetted and you've trusted. But how important is that ultimately with price? Like, having someone you know and trust and can work with. I mean, I know it seems like an obvious answer, but a lot of times people will look at it and go, this looks just as good. I mean, is that kind of important, somewhat important, essential? And feel free to be honest.
For me, it's actually really essential now, because I've kind of, as I've seen things kind of change over the years and, made some mistakes, had some learning curves. Kind of our philosophy now is minimize the number of vendors that we're working with, keep it down to quality, because ultimately I do not want to deal with problems on the back end. My biggest time eater is having to do claims, take flooring out, like deal with that whole thing. So partnering with somebody that I feel like gives us good customer service is worth everything. So, and that's one reason I love Revel Woods, I have to say, because I feel like I have a question. I know you're going to answer it. Your dad will answer it. Like somebody
You
will
know,
help
my
me
parents,
through
yeah.
it. Like, because there's always going to be that crazy thing that happens once in a while. Like it just does, or a random question or something on a subfloor I haven't seen before. But that partnership, knowing that you have a relationship with somebody and you can call them when you need something, that's worth so much more than quantity or having, 20 vendors or really loyalty. It all comes down to good relationships.
And I
So
think that's probably more true now than ever, even though, none of us are allowed to hang out in person anymore.
yeah.
That's going to be key. And now I'm thinking, on the showroom side of things, one of the things we're trying to help with is there's a lot of showrooms, both flooring as well as designer showrooms around the country that are not even allowed to be open right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know when they're going to be allowed to open again. So having at least, even if we're not necessarily someone's primary source, being able to get product until your other showroom can open again, or you can take clients there, or you can even meet with them, even remotely. We're happy to send samples directly to clients. We do that all the time. Seems like almost went from being convenient to now being essential.
Oh,
It feels like I think the design industry is going to change. I think it's going to be more like, what you're talking about, in that we're going to have to, as an industry, figure out how to get more profit out of every job,
oh,
and I,
and for me, concentrating my time on where I'm going to make the most money. I'm not going to make a lot of money picking a paint color. Am I going to do it for clients? Yeah, some of them, but where I'm going to put my effort is flooring, hardwood top, number one, because that's my biggest profit margin. And then, the other things, hourly and all of that comes into play. But I think you have to be smart about how you do it. And a lot of other designers aren't doing it. So it's a great opportunity to be kind of an expert in that area, in your area maybe. And
if I was picking a designer and someone said, look, I'm going to handle this whole thing and the whole project's going through me and I'm going to take care of it and it's going to be the right materials. And even beyond that, I think a complete vision seems like there's some value to it. We've worked with designers in the past where we've had stuff picked out and the client has run off and they said, yeah, I went to a home show and I found this flooring and I bought it. And I know the designers get really frustrated with that. I mean, obviously we're frustrated with that, but the designers get really frustrated because it's like, you just blew up this whole vision. Like you can't just change the flooring and expect this to look the same. This was all picked holistically, and synergistically, and you can't just go out and say, oh, I picked this. Can you change this so that it fits? Because I got a good deal on it. Yeah. And I got to imagine as a designer, it's like, oh, that is not good. So what would you say to a designer in that situation? Like, how do you keep your clients in the pen, if you will?
Yeah.
Figuratively, not literally. We do not keep people in pens.
I think it goes back to your relationship. I think that kind of what your business values are, and how you work with that client and how you set the boundary from the beginning. For us, like I'm really big on customer service. That's always been probably my number one thing is good communication, customer service. So I let people know just from the beginning, this is how we run our projects, start to finish. I do the construction schedule. We do all of that. I'm at the construction meetings. I'm just involved in all that. So I always know what's going on. So if there's ever an issue with anything, people, anybody can call me and I can figure something out for them. So in kind of creating my business that way, a lot of my clientele are other business owners. I found that's kind of where my tribe is, my people are. They value their time. They know they can trust me. They know that I can handle the decisions and they can check in once a week with me or Friday, they're going to get a schedule update and they know I've got it handled. So I think setting that expectation with your client at the beginning, and there's always those that are going to do something crazy. Like I've had that. I had somebody not too long ago. We picked a rock for their house and they were doing hardy, and I left town for a week and I came back and she had changed her entire house to orange brick, literally. every inch of the house, and it's like a 15,000 square foot house. So red brick. Yeah, I was like,
what am I going to do with this?
sometimes it runs away. And
But do
then
you, so you just, in those situations, do you just try and do your best, or do you ever fire the client if they do that? I mean,
tell her I'd love it because,
right. But at some point you still have to pay the bills, right? So,
yeah.
and they do get away from you. And I know it's easy for someone like me to say, well, just don't let them do that. But it's like, yeah, okay, you tell them that. So we get that too.
I think you definitely can minimize it just by the expectation and just being upfront about this is how we do things. This is why we do it. If clients understand why you have certain things in place, usually if it makes sense, they're like, oh yeah, okay, it's
right.
Fine with it. So
yeah, I guess that's probably true. Most reasonable people, if you can explain this is why we're doing it this way, and yes, you don't want to run off and get it. Yes, you can get this type of floor. It looks similar. It's less expensive, but here's all the reasons why you don't invest an enormous amount of money into something that's going to sit in that house for decades. Why that's maybe not where you skimp, which is better for the designer too, because if you know they've got a budget for their remodel of, I don't know, $120,000 or whatever an average remodel goes for these days. I'm probably low on that, but a little low. Yeah. We're just remodeling like one tiny little room, or whatever it is. Right. But if you know, okay, this is the budget, here's where we skimp and here's where we don't. And yes, obviously in flooring, you don't want to skimp for multiple reasons, not just because it's going to be more profitable for you or any designer, but also because it's actually a good idea to not skimp there. Because if you don't like it, or you get a little more money next year, you got a bonus or whatever, you're not just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to just replace this. Like, you're going to replace the floor. You're going to start over. So it's really important to get that right.
So
in our experience,
explain that to the customer. So when I'm picking something too, I found if I'm going to be selling the flooring, which we generally are now, I'm going to start with the flooring, like picking that, because a lot of times if they have a budget of, whatever, they know they're going to go over. I don't want them to use it all up on maybe the windows before we've even got to the interior where I know they really need to spend it. So flooring, I usually start with that. If they're going to do a wood floor, we pick that. And one thing, if you explain to them kind of with flooring, they're already paying like this much, right, for flooring. To go from builder grade up a level or two levels, you're only paying this much more. So get the thing you really want for this much more, because to replace it, you've got to take out the furniture, you got to take the baseboards off. You're going to, like, when you start to explain the process, they're like, oh, yeah. Or, like, just put the hardwood in this hallway as well, because you don't want to chip tile out. Or like when you explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, no, for sure. Like, thank you.
That's a great upselling technique too, because and it's not just manipulation. Like, it's true.
No, it really is.
You really don't get another shot at this. So if there's something you want, you do it now. and then you might get another shot at some of the lighting fixtures or something. I had my cabinets refaced recently. It wasn't the most fun thing in the world, but I didn't have to move out of the house.
Yeah.
So it was done in it was like a weekend and it was over. But so you could always, I think that's going to be key, I think, for designers, right? Is finding that, okay, well, I know this is what you really want is up here and your budget's right here. So here's where we can pull to get this. And here's where we should pull. And here's where we shouldn't pull.
Yeah. And let's maybe, this is a little high in this area. Let's move that over, save a little on that. Let's put it in that flooring budget and get that base where we need to be. So,
right. We can always revisit this other piece in a couple of years or next year or whenever. And I've met very few people in the years that I've been doing this that have, years later looked at their floor and said, I just paid too much for this. I just paid too much it's great, but I really wish I had that extra 25 cents a square foot right now. Typically it goes the other way, right? Like they wake up.
I've never heard that either. That's interesting. Yeah.
Man, I just paid too much for this. I think usually what happens after several months or whatever, when they're looking at your flooring. If you got the one you want, it's like, I just love this, I'm happy. And if they skimped and got a deal, usually you're not thinking like 8 months later, you wake up and you're having coffee in the morning and you're thinking, oh yeah, I mean, I hate this floor, but I am so happy I have that, extra 75 cents a square foot. I
Yeah.
usually just looking at it going like, why did I do this? Like I wasted this whole remodel. And that regret, like it's unfortunate that they don't know they're going to feel that in the time and when they're making those decisions. But as a designer, I feel like there's a real opportunity there to say, look, trust me, I've been at this for a while. Like you're not going to want
Yeah.
to skimp here.
I think it's an opportunity, and I also think it's a responsibility, because really they're hiring us. We have to have the client's best interest in mind. So I think if you're not educating them on that and giving them that knowledge where they, giving the opportunity to make an educated decision, I think you're doing the customer a disservice. So
That's actually a really good point. So on that, I'll mention one other thing, and then I'll let you go. But you'd mentioned earlier with trusted partners. I was actually going to tell the story with one of the orders you had done with us. We had ordered some of that product, and it went on a different job site. And all of a sudden, we got a call from that contractor that was panicked that the product did not match an older product run number, which can happen sometimes with some manufacturers. The lots don't match. We try really hard to pick somewhere that isn't the case, but sometimes even just depending on where the wood was sourced, if you got white oak from this one area at this one time and you got white oak 8 months later that was sourced from this forest over here, this might be the exact same stain, but the run numbers are going to, the lots are going to look different. So it's not just a matter when you're making flooring of, well, just use the same formulation every time, because that doesn't work, right? You have to, so they have these master samples and they make sure the color, they have to, every time they run the color, they got to dial it in every single time. Anyway, so I say all of that to say that we suddenly had heard before we had shipped your order that had a couple of different lot numbers in it that they might not have matched. And I didn't let you know right away. I think I told you the story later, but I started panicking because I thought there's 2 lot numbers on this order going out. And it was for a model home, I think you were doing.
It was the Parade of Homes last year.
It was a big deal. Yeah, it was a big deal. So I knew that. So I immediately was like, we're tracking this down. We said, okay, find some from these different lots in our warehouse. Let's pull them out. Let's look at them. So we had 3 or 4 boxes from each one splayed out across our warehouse floor because someone else had said that it wasn't, the wood they had put in the kitchen wasn't matching the back hall. And so we were looking it over. We had opened up several boxes. We were like, they look identical. Like you mix these up, you would not know what came from what box. I don't know what he's talking about. And then the contractor from that other job had called later that afternoon and said, yeah, it was just the lighting. When I shined a light on this, it actually looks fine. I don't know. It's fine. It's just because the lighting in the front hall was natural light and the lighting in the kitchen had made it look different. So I never bothered you with that, but it was one of those things where it was like, I was not going to wait for a phone call from you saying this didn't match. What am I going to do? We're halfway through this install. I'm on a deadline. We jumped all over that.
Like, I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that. Any other vendor would just ship that product. It's because it would be my responsibility to check die lot numbers before we order, right? So they would ship the product. I might not know. I might go on the job site and the installer might install it without paying attention if it's,
we will ship from different die lots, but we always inspect it.
But the fact that you inspect it gives me such peace of mind that I know I don't have to worry about a Revel Woods job. Like that is worth a lot for me.
Well, I appreciate that. It was, but you would mention that and I had thought, oh yeah, that actually did happen. And I figured I'd be honest about it, but it turned out it was fine, but I was panicked that day and I didn't call you. I wasn't going to call you until I knew there was a problem. And I was going to tell you, please don't install. And it hadn't been installed yet. I think it had been delivered, but it hadn't been installed. But I was like going to tell you again, if there was an issue, I was not going to just, well, let's hope they don't notice, it was going to be stop, don't install this. We're replacing it. Walk away from it.
That wood that you're shipping us this week or next, whatever it is going into that same home. The people that bought that Parade of Homes loved it so much they're adding it to their master bedroom and a couple other areas. So
Well, it's going to match. So
So we'll
I
be
promise
fine.
you it's going to match.
It'll be all good.
We are going to be fine. Well, I appreciate, is there anything else, and you're not obligated to, but is there anything else you think as far as tips for any designers that would want to get into this? It's maybe not adding this. Would you even be willing if somebody wanted to send you an email and ask you questions about it?
Oh,
Would you?
absolutely. For
I mean, I know
sure.
you're super busy, but
No,
you don't have to say anything here. I can put it in the notes. I can put it in contact.
no, I would love to help other designers. I would say jump in and go for it. And I would do it with, honestly, with Revel Woods. It's get on your website. I would tell them get on, play around with it, look at the different products that you have, and just how you select the wood on your website is so easy. It really, like I said, it's kind of dummy proof. So I would not leave that money on the table. That's a big ticket item. And after you do a job or two, it's easy. You just get the confidence and you'll just hit the ground running and yeah, make some money.
I love that. Thank you. And I will say, yeah, you just touched on an interesting point too, that the first jobs are always the trickiest because you're just feeling it out. Maybe, a lot of times we'll find an installer partner for a designer. We didn't have to do that for you specifically, so you can't talk about that experience. But we have had other designers where we have a very trusted, vetted network where we'll partner with someone that is not going to push up on them for money. They just want to know, like, these are the types of installers where they're masters at what they do, and they just want to show up and have everything be there and ready to go. And they do their thing and they make the money, and they don't have to go back and forth about which shade of taupe is specific to this job.
Yeah. A good installer will help talk you through it too on the back end, quietly. They'll help guide you if you need it a little bit too. So, and of course, you can call your company and
yeah, we will do all of that. We make sure, and it's always those first couple jobs where it's the most hand holding. But you're right. After you do it a couple times, it's sort of like, why was I not always doing this?
so easy. Yeah.
Right. I'm pulling in an extra 3, 4, some cases $7,000 a job.
Who doesn't need that?
Yeah, I would take it
Yeah.
if I knew how to be a designer. Well, Lori, thank you so much for doing this. I know you're busy and you're taking time out of your schedule here quarantining, but working from home. I know you guys are still working from home. So thank you again. And we will see you next time.